December 11th, 6 o'clock in the morning. 3 Russian refineries are burning. An oil platform in the Caspian Sea is on fire. A runway in the Arctic with a crater and damaged air bases from north to south. Meanwhile, in the capital Moscow, 4 airports were closed for 10 hours, 200 flights were cancelled. Thousands of people were stuck, millions spent on missile interceptors, but zero destruction. Something was illogical. Ukraine has just launched its biggest attack in the entire war. 300 drones with a range of 2,000 kilometers from the Arctic to the Caspian Sea. The capital of Russia, a place that Russia defended with all its might, remained unscathed while the rest of the country burned. And when you find out why, everything will become clear. Because it all started with a lie. Not all of these 300 drones had targets. About 100 of them were sent directly to Moscow, but were not programmed to destroy anything. The task was simple: to fly and circle. That's it. This is military chess. That's what Ukraine has done. This is Ukraine. This is for the note. It is capable of tracking and launching a limited number of targets and interceptors. If there are more targets than the system can handle, saturation occurs. Some targets will break through, but Ukraine turned out to be trickier. Ukraine has focused Russia's attention on one point, rather than distributing efforts everywhere. The most important point. Russia had no choice but to defend Moscow with all its might, surround the capital until Russia reacted. And she reacted exactly as she should have. Sirens all over the city are a common alarm signal. 4 airports are being closed at the same time. Air defense systems are firing non-stop. Millions of dollars are being spent on interceptors. Think about it. Moscow is the place where Putin is. There was no choice. It was necessary to protect. And can you imagine the consequences? The 4 main airports were closed for almost half a day. Supply chains are disrupted. Air cargo is delayed. Airlines are transferring crews. Each cancelled flight cost tens of thousands of dollars. The knife is worth 200, but the real price was not financial, but psychological. And while all the attention of Russia was there, 200 drones went to another place. Samara is 800 kilometers deep into Russia. Residents filmed something strange on video. From 15 to 20 drones crossed the sky. They fly so low that they almost touch the treetops. No air defense system opened fire. There was not a single siren, absolute silence. The drones just flew in. And 30 minutes later, the refinery in Syzran was already on fire. It wasn't just Samara. At Fivsk, 400 kilometers from the border, fuel tanks caught fire. See, oh, my husband is in the woods right now. Production dropped sharply by 20 to 30%. And this refinery has already been attacked 5 times since July, now 6. This is a Ukrainian strategy. Attack the same target 6 times in 5 months. Each hit adds damage to the previous one. The refinery is not fully restored, and repairs are becoming more expensive, more difficult, and longer. It's like ripping off a wound that's trying to heal. Eventually, it doesn't heal anymore. So that you understand, FIPS can produce 9 as much as 1/10 of a million tons per year, but due to constant attacks, it does not work at full capacity. Saratov was burning. In Volgograd, everything exploded on the same night, while Moscow was fighting with empty drones. But there is something that no one expected, something that changed everything. In the middle of the Caspian Sea, 1,500 kilometers deep into Russia, there is the Filanovsky oil platform, which is operated by the state giant Lukoil. On the night of the 11th of December, there was a fire. I wondered what it meant. The Caspian Sea, unlike Black, is completely surrounded by land. To get there, the drone needs to cross hundreds of kilometers of Russian territory without being detected, without being shot down, carrying enough explosives to destroy an oil platform at sea. This was the first attack on an offshore platform in the entire war. Putin thought that the Caspian Sea was safe, that it was too far away, out of reach. That fire means a loss of over $6 million a day in revenue. The fire was so powerful that it was extinguished for several hours. And at that moment, one disturbing thing became quite obvious. There are no protected places in Russia. There was no turning back. If Ukraine can reach the Caspian Sea, it can hit any platform, any oil refinery, any warehouse anywhere. The strategic depth that Russia has always counted on no longer exists. The Russian territory no longer provides protection. Distance is no longer a guarantee of safety. But this is not the end. While the south was burning, the drones flew to the far north in the Arctic. Murmansk is a base that Russia uses for strategic bombers such as the Tu-95 and Tu-160. These are giant planes that have always been out of reach. Historically, the Russian Air Force has used these northern bases as a rear. When pressure builds up in the south, planes fly to the Arctic, where they are inaccessible and safe. Or at least that's what they thought until that night. The drone hit the runway. As a result, a huge crater was formed, and it became unusable. Repairing a runway in the Arctic in winter is not a quick thing. There is a problem in Russia. If the Arctic is already unsafe, where to place bombers? The only option is the Far East. Thousands of extra kilometers, more time, more fuel, less efficiency, and that's not all. 3 other bases were attacked in Ivanovo. 2 Su-30 and 4 damaged. The same planes are dropping planning bombs on Ukraine. Every destroyed plane is less bombs on Ukrainian territory. A fuel depot was blown up in Ryazan. Planes do not take off without aviation fuel, and special kerosene cannot be transported by ordinary trucks. We need reliable infrastructure, special tanks, pumping systems. All of this has been destroyed. In Voronezh, the air defense system was completely destroyed. The strategy is clear. First, destroy the air defense systems so that the base becomes vulnerable to future attacks. To blind the enemy before striking Voronezh. Now it's open. Do you know what's the most curious thing about this? The moment when this attack occurred was not an accident. 2 days before that, on December 9th, Trump made a statement in which he said that Ukraine was losing, that Putin had an advantage, and that Ukraine had no trump cards for negotiations. It was reported that the Trump administration insisted on a peace agreement before Christmas, an agreement that would include the cession of territories, especially Donbass. However, in September, 2 months before that, after a meeting with Zelensky, Trump said something else. She stated that Ukraine can not only hold the line, but also return everything back, and possibly more. Do you want to know what has changed? The perception that Ukraine was weak, was losing momentum without options. This change of tone did not occur in a vacuum. There is a narrative in Washington that the war has turned in Russia's favor. That prolonging the conflict only leads to more suffering, that it is better to accept reality and start negotiations. This narrative was gaining strength even among the allies. 48 hours after Trump's words that Ukraine has no trump cards, it actually showed its trump cards. With fire from the Arctic to the Caspian, hitting targets that Putin considered unattainable, coordinating the attack of 300 drones, which completely deceived the Russian defense. It was not just a military operation, but a political message, and Russia tried to belittle the significance of the event. The Ministry of Defense stated that it shot down 287 drones. The damage was minimal. But how to explain the 3 burning oil refineries, filmed by local observers and Russian military bloggers? How to explain the fire on the platform in the Caspian Sea? 200 cancelled flights, affecting thousands of people, and a crater in the Arctic, visible from a satellite. The word minimal does not fit with all this destruction in any way. And when the government says that everything is under control and the damage is minimal, citizens see how fighter jets shoot for hours over Moscow, get stuck at airports, watch videos of burning refineries. In social networks, trust has collapsed. This is, in fact, a psychological war. Ukraine does not need to convince the Russian government, it needs to sow doubts among the population, whether their leaders are really telling the truth. And every time the ministry says the minimum, and people see the fire, these doubts only grow. And even if Russia is telling the truth, this attack is still impressive. Because if Russia shot down 287 out of 300 drones, there are only 13 left. These 13 drones burned down 3 refineries. An oil platform was destroyed, a runway in the Arctic was destroyed, planes were damaged and fuel storage facilities were blown up. Think about it, just 13 drones have done all of this. Either Russia is lying, or Russia. Many have indeed passed. One thing is clear, the strategy worked perfectly, and this operation showed something else, the industrial potential of Ukraine. These 300 drones are manufactured in the country, they are imported. For example, Lyuty has a range of 2,000 kilometers and carries 350 kilograms of explosives. The cost is $200,000 apiece. For comparison, Russian interceptors cost millions. The math doesn't add up. Ukraine spends hundreds of thousands to force Russia to spend millions. But there is another, even more important point. I'm talking about the strategy of repeated attacks on oil refineries, which I mentioned earlier, because earlier Ukraine attacked, waited, attacked again, gave time for repairs, and now everything has changed. Now it attacks the same targets several times in a row. Refinery in Afipsky attacked 6 times since July, and Syzran 3 times since August. Each attack increases the previous damage. Repairs become more expensive, more complicated, and take longer. Oil refineries are increasingly idle, which is why the oil refining capacity in Russia has decreased to 5 million barrels per day. This means less gasoline, less diesel fuel, less products to sell, less money to finance the war. As you can see, Ukraine is draining Russia economically. And on the 11th of December, it proved that Ukraine has the capabilities, technologies, and the desire to continue this indefinitely. So when you hear that Ukraine is losing, remember that night. A nation capable of coordinating 300 drones at a distance of 2,000 kilometers from the Arctic to the Caspian Sea, using decoys to deceive one of the largest air defense systems in the world. This is not a nation on the verge of collapse. This is a nation that adapts, develops, and has found a way to fight on its own terms. Ultimately, this war will not be decided by the number of tanks on each side, or by how many territories are in question. It will be decided by those who will be able to support the efforts longer. Now, I want to know your opinion. Do you think this kind of attack changes the course of the peace talks? Write in the comments if this video was useful for you. Share this with those who need to understand what is really going on in this war. And subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the following tests. See you in the next video.